Number 10. Peeing in public. All right, imagine this. You're out for a leisurely afternoon stroll. The sun is shining, birds are chirping, and suddenly nature calls. You find a discreet little corner, perhaps behind a bush, do your business, and then casually go about your day. No biggie, right? Except, this isn't some secluded nature trail. This is the middle of a bustling 14th century city. And by discreet corner, I mean literally any wall, alley, or sometimes just the open street. Welcome to the shockingly normal world of public urination in the good old days. Today, if you tried to relieve yourself on a busy street corner, you'd be looking at a hefty fine, public shaming, and possibly a viral video you really don't want to be in. But for our ancestors, sanitation was less about hygiene and more about, well, just getting it out. Cities back then were essentially open-air toilets, with human and animal waste forming a charming, fragrant mosaic on the cobblestones. There were no public restrooms, no plumbing as we know it, and certainly no social media to document your indiscretions. So when the urge struck, you simply found the nearest available vertical surface and let her rip. It was a utilitarian approach to bodily functions, driven by necessity and a profound lack of understanding about germs. If you're currently horrified by the idea of sharing a sidewalk with puddles of medieval bodily fluids, just remember, they were probably horrified by the idea of waiting in line for a Starbucks. Basically, personal privacy was a privilege, not a right, and certainly not a public amenity. Number 9. Sharing a bath. You've had a long, grimy day. All you want is to soak in a hot tub, perhaps with a scented candle and some calming music. It's your sanctuary, your moment of blissful solitude. Now, shatter that peaceful image and replace it with 5 of your closest and least hygienic friends, neighbors, or even complete strangers, all crammed into the same tub in the same murky water. And oh, by the way, you're all using the same dirty bath water because getting fresh hot water was an absolute nightmare. Welcome to the communal bath, a luxury that would make your modern skin crawl. For large swaths of history, from Roman bathhouses to medieval public baths, personal hygiene was often a group activity. Water was a precious commodity, and heating it was even more so. So rather than everyone getting their own pristine tub, families, friends, and even paying customers would take turns using the same water. The wealthier you were, the earlier in the line you got, meaning you might actually experience something resembling clean water. If you were at the end, well, let's just say you were essentially marinating in everyone else's grime. Soap, as we know it, was a distant dream for many, adding to the delightful microbial stew. So next time you complain about someone else's bath bomb scent, be thankful you're not sharing your suds with half the village. Basically, personal hygiene was a team sport and you were always playing defense. Number 8. Wearing animal guts as clothes. You're picking out your outfit for the day. Comfort, style. Ethical sourcing. These might be on your mind. You slip into your favorite cotton shirt, maybe some sturdy denim jeans, confident that no part of it once contained, say, a cow's dinner. But for your ancient ancestors, the latest fashion trend might have involved donning a freshly cleaned, or more likely not so freshly cleaned, stretch of animal intestine. Yes, really. From early hunter-gatherers using every part of a kill to various indigenous cultures, animal guts were incredibly versatile. They were strong, flexible, and surprisingly durable when properly prepared. You could make waterproof parkas out of seal intestines, or strong sinew for sewing, or even translucent window coverings. While some might have been meticulously cleaned and stretched until they were almost unrecognizable as intestines, others, well, let's just say the freshness factor might have varied. Imagine the subtle aroma of your new gut wear after a long day in the sun, or the questionable texture. Today, we fret over organic cotton and sustainable denim. Our ancestors were rocking repurposed organs with a straight face. So the next time you wince at a slightly itchy wool sweater, remember it could be a whole lot worse. Basically, haute couture was literally awful chore. Now, number 7, believing in bleeding for cures. Feeling a bit under the weather, got a pesky fever, a persistent headache, or just a general sense of malaise. Today, you'd probably pop some ibuprofen, maybe get some rest, or if things are really bad, make an appointment with an actual doctor. But for centuries, if you were feeling ill, the go-to cure-all was to simply drain some of your blood. Yes, bloodletting was not just a fringe practice. It was a cornerstone of medical treatment, believed to balance your humors and purge the sickness right out of you. This wasn't just a quick prick. It often involved opening a vein with a special lancet or applying leeches and letting a significant amount of blood flow out. The more severe your illness, the more blood they might take. Feeling weak from a high fever? Let's make you weaker. Fainting? Must be working. The logic was rooted in ancient Greek and Roman theories of the four humors: blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile, which were believed to control your health. An imbalance meant sickness, and bleeding was the fastest way to get things back in whack. Forget penicillin. Your medieval physician was more interested in a literal blood sacrifice to the gods of pseudoscience. If you've ever felt a little woozy after giving blood for a good cause, imagine doing it when you're already sick, with a doctor who thinks more blood loss is the answer. Basically, your ancestors thought the best way to keep a car running was to drain the oil. Number 6. Not changing your clothes, ever. You meticulously plan your laundry schedule. Whites on Monday, colors on Tuesday, maybe an extra load for your workout gear. You probably wouldn't dream of wearing the same socks for a week, let alone the same entire outfit for months on end. Now, prepare to have your mind and nose utterly boggled. For a significant portion of history, changing clothes, particularly outer garments, was not a daily, weekly, or even monthly affair for many people. Your ancestors were basically living in their clothes, day in and day out, until they literally fell apart. For the vast majority of people throughout the Middle Ages and beyond, clothing was incredibly expensive and labor-intensive to produce. A single wool tunic or a linen shift could represent weeks, if not months, of work, and owning more than one or two outfits was a luxury reserved for the very wealthy. So you wore what you had, and wore it some more. Washing facilities were primitive, and washing clothes was a Herculean task involving harsh lye, boiling water, and a lot of elbow grease. Definitely not something you did for every single item after a single wear. Undergarments might get washed more frequently, but your outer layers, the ones exposed to all the charming medieval muck, were essentially permanent fixtures until they disintegrated or became truly irreparable. Imagine the sheer accumulation of dirt, sweat, body odor, and whatever else you picked up from the unpaved, animal-laden streets. So, the next time you bemoan having to do another load of laundry, just be thankful you're not chiseling off a year's worth of grime from your favorite tunic. Basically, fast fashion meant your clothes disintegrated quickly, not that you changed them often. Number 5. Marrying your first cousin. Alright, settle down, because this one usually elicits a pretty strong reaction today. The mere suggestion of marrying your first cousin probably makes you want to spontaneously combust from social awkwardness. It's often viewed as taboo, a little weird, and thanks to science, widely known to come with potential genetic risks. But back in the day, especially among certain social classes, marrying your first cousin wasn't just acceptable. It was often considered a perfectly reasonable, even advantageous thing to do. Why? Well, for the wealthy and aristocratic, it was all about keeping that sweet, sweet inheritance in the family. Land, titles, power. You didn't want that diluting by bringing in some random outsider. Marrying a first cousin meant consolidating wealth and ensuring the family line remained pure. Genetically speaking, they clearly had no idea what they were talking about. For commoners, especially in isolated communities, your pool of eligible partners might have been pretty limited. Plus, it meant you already knew the family, which was a huge bonus in an era where stranger danger was a very real, very unhygienic threat. The concept of inbreeding depression wasn't exactly taught in medieval biology classes. So, the next time your family reunion feels a little too close for comfort, remember it could have been an actual dating pool. Basically, family trees back then were more like family shrubs. Number 4. Relying on superstition for everything. Got a nagging toothache? Your cow suddenly stopped giving milk? Your latest crush just sneezed on you and now you're pretty sure it's a bad omen? Today, you'd probably hit up WebMD, call a vet, or maybe just get a new crush. But for centuries, your ancestors' answer to pretty much any problem, big or small, wasn't science, logic, or even a well-reasoned plan. It was, almost invariably, superstition. And I'm talking about superstitions that would make your TikTok algorithm blush with embarrassment. From carrying a badger's tooth for good luck to believing that church bells could ward off lightning, spoiler alert, they often attracted it, striking the bell towers and their ringers, life was a constant dance with unseen forces. Every cough, every strange cloud formation, every unexpected visitor was interpreted as a sign, a curse, or a blessing. Illness wasn't caused by germs, it was caused by evil spirits or an angry fairy. Crop failure wasn't due to bad weather, it was due to a neighbor's evil eye. People hung apotropaic charms, objects meant to ward off evil, on their doors, wore bizarre amulets, and performed elaborate rituals for everything from a safe childbirth to a bountiful harvest. There was no concept of a random event. Everything had a spiritual cause. So the next time your Wi-Fi cuts out, be thankful you're not wondering which disgruntled gnome just cursed your router. Basically, logic was less a guiding principle and more a suggestion that was politely ignored. Number 3. Ignoring basic hygiene. Okay, we've touched on this implicitly with the communal baths and the never-changing clothes, but let's just hammer it home. Your ancestors were, by modern standards, spectacularly unhygienic. Forget daily showers, deodorant, or even regular hand washing. For centuries, across most social strata, what we consider basic personal hygiene was either unknown, ignored, or simply too much effort given the resources. Your great-great-great-great-grandpappy probably smelled like a charming blend of stale sweat, wood smoke, and whatever livestock he last interacted with. The concept of germs simply didn't exist until relatively recently. People understood that dirt was unsightly, but they didn't connect it to disease. Bathing was infrequent, often seen as a seasonal event rather than a daily necessity. Teeth brushing? Forget about it. Bad breath was just breath. Body odor? That was just your smell. Perfumes, when available, were often used to mask rather than eliminate odors, creating a truly unique aromatic experience. Human waste was routinely thrown into streets or rivers, contaminating water sources. Open sewers were a charming urban feature. The sheer density of people, animals, and waste in medieval cities created environments that would send a modern public health inspector into a full-blown existential crisis. So, if you've ever judged someone for not showering for a day, just imagine living in a world where everyone was permanently that guy. Basically, air fresheners would have been considered witchcraft. Number 2. Treating children like miniature adults. You probably think of childhood as a protected, playful time, full of learning, growth, and maybe a few too many screen hours. We have child labor laws, educational systems designed for developing minds, and a general understanding that kids are, well, kids. But for a huge chunk of history, the concept of childhood as a distinct phase of life deserving of special protection and nurturing was largely absent. Your ancestors treated their children less like delicate blossoms and more like tiny, less skilled versions of themselves. Once past infancy and a terrifyingly high infant mortality rate, children were expected to contribute to the household economy as soon as they were physically able. This meant working in fields, learning trades, or performing domestic chores from a very young age. Play was often seen as frivolous, not crucial for development. Education, for the vast majority, was practical and vocational, not academic. Clothing was often miniature versions of adult attire rather than comfortable play clothes. Emotional bonds were certainly present, but the societal emphasis was on utility and survival. Childhood was brutally short, often ending by age 7 or 8, when a child might be sent to work as an apprentice or servant in another household. So the next time your teenager complains about doing chores, remind them that their medieval counterpart would probably be operating a loom or mucking out a stable. Basically, kids will be kids meant kids would be small, tired workers. Number 1. Consuming questionable food and drink. Alright, buckle up, because this one might just put you off your next meal. You probably trust that the food you buy at the grocery store is, food. It's regulated, it's fresh, mostly, and it definitely doesn't contain any surprise animal parts you didn't bargain for. But, for your ancestors, dining was often a high-stakes game of culinary roulette, where hygiene was a suggestion and quality control was a myth. Your daily bread could be a lot more rustic than you'd ever imagine. Let's start with bread, the staff of life. Sounds wholesome, right? Except medieval bread was often made from whatever grains were available, which frequently included things like rye, contaminated with ergot, a fungus that causes convulsions, hallucinations, and gangrene. Basically, a trip on the bad kind of magic mushrooms, with a side of limb loss. Or, if the harvest was poor, your bread might be bulked up with sawdust, ground acorns, or even clay. Imagine biting into your sourdough and hitting a rock. Surprise! And then there's the water. Clean drinking water was a pipe dream, pun intended. Rivers were often used as open sewers, wells could be contaminated, and stagnant puddles were, well, they were there. So, what did everyone drink? Ale and beer. Lots of it. Even children drank weak ale because it was safer than water. This wasn't for fun. It was a desperate measure to avoid dysentery. Your medieval toddler was essentially starting their day with a light buzz. Meat was another adventure. Without refrigeration, meat spoiled quickly. But rather than throwing it out, they'd often just heavily spice it to mask the putrid taste and smell. Those expensive medieval spices weren't just for flavor. They were for disguising decay. Imagine biting into what you thought was a savory stew, only to realize you're eating something that's been dead for a little too long and is now just a vehicle for an aggressive amount of pepper. So the next time you complain about your lukewarm coffee, just remember it could be warm, questionable ale, and your toast could be sparking hallucinations. Basically, dining out meant risking a trip to the afterlife.